In the history of America's Got Talent, no one had ever seen this happen. Simon Cowell stood up from his chair, and from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The studio lights were blazing as they always did on a typical Tuesday night at the Dolby Theater in Hollywood. Thousands of audience members filled the seats, their phones ready to capture whatever magic or disaster might unfold on that iconic stage. The judges sat in their usual positions, Howie Mandel cracking jokes to ease the tension, Heidi Klum radiating warmth, and Simon Cowell, arms crossed, wearing his signature black V-neck t-shirt, eyes scanning every performer with that legendary mix of skepticism and surgical precision. But what was about to happen would shatter every expectation Simon had built over decades of judging talent shows around the world. A man walked onto the stage. He was not what anyone expected. No flashy costume, no backup dancers, no dramatic entrance. Just a man in his late 60s, wearing a faded plaid flannel shirt that had seen better days, worn blue jeans with dirt stains that soap couldn't quite remove, and work boots that had walked 1,000 miles of farmland. His hands were weathered, calloused, the hands of someone who had spent his entire life working the soil. His face carried deep lines, not from laughter, but from years of sun, wind, rain, and the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting battles most people never see. The audience fell silent, not out of respect, but out of confusion. This was America's Got Talent, where spectacle was the currency. And this man looked like he had just stepped off a tractor. Simon leaned forward, one eyebrow raised. "And you are?" he asked, his British accent cutting through the silence like a knife. The man cleared his throat, gripping the microphone with both hands as if it were the only thing keeping him steady. "My name is Robert," he said quietly. "Robert Mitchell. I'm a farmer from Iowa." Howie smiled warmly. "Welcome, Robert. So what brings you to AGT today? Are you going to sing? Dance? Magic trick?" Robert shook his head slowly. "No, sir. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here because I have something to say. And I think the world needs to hear it." The judges exchanged glances. Simon's jaw tightened. The producers backstage started whispering into their headsets. This was not the script. This was not the plan. But no one stopped him. Robert took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice trembled but his words were clear. 32 years ago, I bought a small farm in Iowa. 50 acres. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I grew corn, soybeans, raised a few cattle. I worked every single day of my life. Didn't take vacations. Didn't buy fancy things. I just worked. Because that's what you do when you love the land. The audience was silent now, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of people beginning to listen. 10 years ago, my wife, Clara, got sick. Cancer. Stage 4. The doctors said there was nothing they could do, but I didn't accept that. I sold half my land to pay for her treatment. Experimental drugs, clinical trials, anything that might give us more time. And it worked. For a while. His voice cracked, and he paused, swallowing hard. Simon's arms slowly unfolded. Heidi's hand moved to her chest. She passed away 3 years ago. And when she did, I realized that I had spent so much time trying to save her life that I forgot to tell her the things that mattered. I forgot to tell her that every sunrise I saw on that farm reminded me of her smile. I forgot to tell her that every storm I weathered reminded me that she was the strongest person I'd ever known. A tear rolled down Robert's cheek, and he didn't wipe it away. After she died, I lost the farm. The bank took it. I tried to fight, but I was too tired. And for the first time in my life, I had nothing. No land. No home. No purpose. I thought about giving up. I really did. The camera cut to Simon. His face was frozen, but his eyes, those famously cold eyes, were glistening. But then one day, I was sitting in a diner, and I saw a little girl with her grandfather. And she asked him, "Grandpa, what do you do?" And he said, "I'm a farmer, sweetheart. I grow food so people like you can eat." and she smiled the biggest smile I'd ever seen. And I realized something. Robert looked directly at Simon. I realized that what I did mattered. That every single person who works the land, who wakes up before the sun, who sacrifices everything to feed this country, they matter. But nobody sees us. Nobody thanks us. We're invisible. And I came here today, not to win $1 million, not to be famous. I came here to say thank you. To every farmer, every worker, every person who gives everything and gets nothing in return. You are seen. You are valued. And your life has meaning. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one breathed. And then Simon Cowell did something no one had ever seen him do in the history of the show. He stood up. Not to press the golden buzzer. Not to give a standing ovation. He stood up and started walking toward the stage. The audience gasped. Producers frantically spoke into their headsets. Howie and Heidi looked at each other in shock. But Simon didn't stop. He walked across the stage floor, his footsteps echoing in the massive theater, until he was standing directly in front of Robert. For a moment neither of them spoke. Simon looked at this man, this farmer who had lost everything, who had come to this stage not for fame but for dignity. And Robert looked back at Simon, the man who had built an empire on being tough, on being unbreakable. And then Simon did something even more shocking. He extended his hand. Robert hesitated, then took it. And Simon didn't just shake his hand. He held it. Firmly. With both hands. And he looked Robert in the eyes and said, loud enough for the microphones to catch, I have spent my entire career judging people. Judging their talent, their potential, their worth. But standing here right now, I realize something. You don't need to be judged. You don't need my approval. Because what you just did, what you just said, is more important than anything I've ever heard on this stage. The audience erupted. Not in applause, but in something deeper. A roar of emotion, of recognition, of shared humanity. People were standing, crying, holding each other. Simon turned to face the audience, still holding Robert's hand, and his voice, usually so controlled, wavered. We live in a world where we celebrate people who can sing, dance, do backflips. But we forget the people who actually hold this world together. The people who work in the shadows. The people who sacrifice everything so the rest of us can live our comfortable lives. And that ends today. He turned back to Robert. You came here to give a message. And I'm going to make sure the world hears it. Simon walked back to the judges' table, but he didn't sit down. He pressed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, raining down on Robert, who stood in the center of the stage, sobbing, his hands covering his face. The audience was on its feet, screaming, crying, reaching toward him as if trying to touch the moment itself. Heidi was wiping tears from her eyes. Howie was speechless, his usual jokes replaced with stunned silence. And Simon stood there, arms at his sides, watching as Robert was lifted by the pure force of the audience's love. Backstage, producers were in chaos. This wasn't how the show was supposed to go. This wasn't a talent act. This was something else entirely. But no one dared stop it. Because they knew, just as everyone in that theater knew, that they were witnessing something rare. Something real. Subscribe and leave a comment, because what happened next changed not just this show, but the way Simon Cowell saw the world forever. After the cameras stopped rolling, after the confetti settled and the audience filed out, Simon stayed. He sat alone in the empty theater, staring at the stage where Robert had stood. One of the producers approached him cautiously. Simon, that was unexpected. We're not sure if we can air it. It's not really a performance. Simon didn't turn around. He just spoke, quietly but firmly. Air it. Every second. And if anyone has a problem with it, they can talk to me. The producer nodded and walked away, leaving Simon alone with his thoughts. The next day, the episode aired. And within hours, it became the most watched moment in America's Got Talent history. Not because of a spectacular performance, but because of a simple truth delivered by a man who had nothing left to lose. Social media exploded. Farmers from across the country posted videos of themselves in their fields, tears streaming down their faces, saying, "Thank you, Robert." Veterans, nurses, teachers, truck drivers, people from every walk of life who felt invisible, who felt forgotten, all shared the same message. "We see you. You matter." Robert Mitchell became an overnight sensation, but not in the way most AGT contestants do. He didn't release a single. He didn't go on tour. He used the platform to start a foundation for struggling farmers, helping them keep their land, paying off their debts, giving them the support that he never had. And Simon Cowell quietly donated a seven-figure sum to that foundation. He didn't announce it publicly. He didn't want credit. He just did it. Because for the first time in his career, he wasn't judging talent. He was honoring humanity. Years later, in an interview, someone asked Simon about that moment. About why he stood up. About why he broke every rule of the show for a farmer from Iowa who didn't sing a note. Simon thought for a long time before answering. And when he finally spoke, his words were measured but filled with emotion. "I've spent my entire life looking for the next big thing. The next star. The next phenomenon. But that night, I realized I'd been looking for the wrong thing. Robert didn't need to be a star. He already was one. He just needed someone to see him. And when I stood up, I wasn't judging him. I was honoring him. Because he reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That the real talent in this world isn't measured by applause. It's measured by sacrifice. By quiet dignity. By showing up every single day, even when no one is watching." He paused, and for a moment, the legendary toughness in his eyes softened. "That farmer changed me. He reminded me why I fell in love with this show in the first place. Not because of the spectacle. But because sometimes, just sometimes, someone walks onto that stage and reminds you what it means to be human." Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. Robert Mitchell never became a household name. But in the hearts of millions of people who saw themselves in him, who felt unseen and unvalued, he became something more important. He became a symbol. A reminder that every life has meaning, that every sacrifice matters, and that sometimes, the most powerful performances are the ones that don't look like performances at all. And Simon Cowell, the man who built an empire on being tough, on being unbreakable, learned something that night. He learned that true strength isn't about never showing emotion. It's about knowing when to stand up, walk across a stage, and shake the hand of someone who deserves to be seen. That moment, that handshake, that refusal to sit back and let the world ignore another invisible hero, became one of the defining moments of Simon's career. Not because it was planned. Not because it was part of the show. But because it was real. And in a world full of spectacle, reality is the rarest thing of all. The weeks following that episode were unlike anything AGT had ever experienced. The show's official YouTube clip of Robert's moment with Simon became the most viewed AGT video of all time, surpassing every golden buzzer, every viral singing audition, every death-defying stunt. Comments flooded in from every corner of the globe. A farmer in Kenya wrote, "I have never felt so seen." A teacher in rural Alabama posted, "I showed this to my students. They finally understand why their parents worked so hard." A nurse in Manchester shared, "I watched this during my night shift and cried. Thank you for reminding me why I do this." But perhaps the most profound impact was on Simon himself. In the months that followed, people who worked with him noticed a change. He still had his sharp wit, his brutal honesty, his refusal to accept mediocrity. But there was something softer now, something more human. During auditions, when someone would come on stage with a story of hardship, of loss, of quiet perseverance, Simon would pause. He would listen differently. Not as a judge looking for the next star, but as a person recognizing another person's dignity. One evening, 6 months after Robert's appearance, Simon received a handwritten letter. It was from Robert. The envelope was slightly worn, the handwriting shaky but careful. Inside, the letter was brief. "Mr. Cowell, I wanted you to know that because of what happened that night, I was able to buy back a small piece of my old farm. Not all of it, But enough. Enough to grow something again. Enough to wake up with purpose. But more than that, I wanted to thank you for standing up. Not just physically, but for standing up for all of us who never expected anyone to notice. You didn't have to do that. But you did. And it changed my life. It changed a lot of lives. I hope you know that. Simon kept that letter in his dressing room. And on particularly difficult days, when the pressure of the industry felt crushing, when the criticism felt too heavy, when he questioned why he was still doing this after all these years, he would read it. And he would remember Robert. And he would remember that sometimes, the most important thing you can do is stand up and shake someone's hand. The story of Robert Mitchell and Simon Cowell became more than just a viral moment. It became a reference point. A reminder that in an industry obsessed with perfection, with spectacle, with manufactured emotion, the most powerful moments are the ones that can't be scripted. The ones that happen when someone dares to break the rules, not for attention, but for connection. And every year, on the anniversary of that night, Simon would post a simple message on social media. To every farmer, every nurse, every teacher, every person who works in the shadows, you are seen. You matter. Thank you. No promotional hashtags. No show branding. Just those words. Because some messages don't need embellishment. They just need to be said.